The arc begins inside a hospital room where Jinwoo and his mother were staying. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the hospital, a head doctor was caught off guard when his colleague rushed in with astonishing news. A patient had miraculously woken up from what was believed to be an irreversible coma. The situation was unprecedented, something unheard of in the medical community. Adding to the shock, the patient's guardian was demanding an immediate discharge, something that went against standard medical procedures. The head doctor, maintaining his professionalism, firmly declined. A patient who had been bedridden for 4 years couldn't possibly be ready to leave. Even if she had regained consciousness, her body would be too weak to support movement. But the colleague, with an almost hesitant tone, revealed something even more baffling. Every single medical test had come back completely normal. The patient showed no signs of muscle atrophy or weakness, as if she had never spent years confined to a hospital bed. She was perfectly healthy and fully capable of walking. The head doctor struggled to understand how such a thing was even possible. Was it some unknown effect of the life-supporting machines? Even if she seemed fine, further observation was necessary. This case needed to be reported and studied. It could change the understanding of modern medicine. However, the colleague, looking uneasy, lowered his voice and mentioned something else. The guardian, demanding the discharge, wasn't an ordinary person. Then, in a hushed whisper, he asked if the head doctor had heard of a man named Sung Jinwoo, the country's newest rank hunter. The moment that name was spoken, a chill ran down the head doctor's spine. His stern resolve wavered, and in an instant, his attitude shifted. He quickly turned back toward the paperwork, suddenly agreeing that it would be unreasonable to keep a perfectly healthy patient in the hospital any longer. With that, he authorized the immediate discharge. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, Jinwoo's younger sister, Jinna, had just arrived. The moment their mother saw her, she was overwhelmed with emotion. It had been years since they last spoke, and now, face to face, she marveled at how much Jinna had grown. Jinna, on the other hand, was too choked up with emotion to say much. Overcome with relief, she rushed forward and embraced her mother tightly. Jinwoo stood back, watching the reunion unfold. A deep sense of fulfillment settled over him. This moment, this happiness, was something he had fought for. After everything he had endured, it finally felt like he was being rewarded. But at the same time, an unsettling feeling gnawed at him. He had already crossed a line. His path as a hunter meant that a peaceful life was no longer within reach. Later, outside the hospital, Jinwoo sat on a bench, scrolling through his phone. After spending so much time inside the castle, he hadn't been able to check his messages. He noticed several missed calls, but figured that if something was urgent, the person would try again. As he skimmed through the news, one article caught his attention. His eyes widened when he saw Kaisel's name mentioned. The article detailed reports of a strange creature flying above Seoul. Authorities had ruled out a dungeon break since there was no evidence of a breach. However, concerns were growing over whether the Hunters Association was failing to maintain control. As he was processing this information, his phone buzzed again. The caller ID showed a familiar name, Chairman Go. Answering the call, Jinwoo was greeted by a serious tone. The chairman asked if Jinwoo had seen the news, implying that he was already aware of the situation. Assuming it was about Kaisel, Jinwoo admitted that he hadn't been keeping up and assured Chairman Go that he would be more careful in the future. However, there was a pause on the other end. Chairman Go seemed momentarily confused before asking again if Jinwoo really hadn't heard the news. Jinwoo hesitated. If the chairman wasn't talking about Kaisel, then what was he referring to? He explained that he had been off the grid, with no access to his phone. Realizing that Jinwoo was still unaware, Chairman Go suggested meeting in person to explain everything. But Jinwoo, eager to get straight to the point, decided to go to the Hunters Association himself. At the association headquarters, Jinwoo met with Chairman Go, who wasted no time in getting to the main issue. In just 4 days, a large-scale operation was set to begin. A mission to reclaim Jeju Island by eliminating the ant colony that had overrun it. It was an operation of national importance, and Jinwoo's participation was being requested. For a moment, Jinwoo considered the opportunity. A raid like this was exactly what he needed, a chance to face high-level monsters and gain experience. It was an ideal situation for leveling up. However, another thought quickly followed. His mother had just woken up after years in a coma. Leaving her so soon after her recovery didn't sit right with him. Before he could give an answer, Jinwoo suddenly tensed. A powerful surge of mana rippled through the air. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. Somewhere nearby, hunters were engaged in battle. Chairman Go, noticing Jinwoo's reaction, smiled and acknowledged his sharp senses. He explained that the energy was coming from the training area, where S-rank hunters were warming up for the upcoming raid. Among them were the elite Japanese hunters who had traveled to Korea for this mission. One name stood out, Goto Ryuji. Hearing that name, Jinwoo's expression changed. He knew exactly who that was. Goto Ryuji wasn't just any hunter. He was Japan's strongest S-rank, a man whose reputation extended far beyond his home country. Even people who weren't involved in the hunting world knew his name. A realization settled over Jinwoo. This mission wasn't just about reclaiming Jeju Island. There was something more at play here, something that involved hunters of the highest caliber, and he was about to find himself right in the middle of it. Chairman Go then suggested that Jinwoo visit the gym. The scene transitioned to the training area, where Baek Yunho was engaged in an intense sparring session with another hunter. Yunho attempted to land a powerful strike, but his opponent intercepted the blow, gripping his hand and sending a shockwave through the room. With a swift motion, the opponent shoved Yunho's shoulder and swept his leg, knocking him to the ground effortlessly. The opponent expressed his disappointment in Yunho's strength, making it clear that he expected more from him. However, Yunho simply smiled and continued the fight without hesitation. The two clashed once more, each strike causing a resounding impact as they tested each other's limits. Meanwhile, Jinwoo and Chairman Go arrived at the gym, taking in the sight of the many elite hunters gathered in one place. Chairman Go noted that it was rare to witness such a strong assembly of S-rank hunters and speculated that the intense mana waves Jinwoo had sensed earlier had likely originated from here. Jinwoo observed the battle and noticed that Yunho appeared to be struggling against his opponent. As if confirming his thoughts, a voice spoke up, stating that Yunho wasn't actually fighting at full strength. If he were, his opponent wouldn't stand a chance. Turning to the source of the voice, Jinwoo saw that Choi Jong-in had entered the gym. Jong-in greeted him and introduced the fighter sparring with Yunho as Ma Dong-wook, the leader of the Fame Guild, one of the top 5 guilds in South Korea and ranked as the 4th strongest in the country. Curious, Jinwoo questioned why Yunho was holding back, despite seeming capable of overpowering his opponent. Zhang Jian, standing nearby, explained that Yunho had an audience watching. Using his full power in front of so many people would put him in an awkward situation, especially considering his transformation ability. Jinwoo realized that the rumors about Yunho's monstrous transformation were indeed true. Jong-in then pointed toward another group, introducing them as the Japanese rank hunters. One by one, he listed their names: Izawa Ippei, Ishida Mari, Tanaka Kenzo, Hashino Minoru, Kumamoto Atsushi, Tawara Kanon, Fujishima Tatsumi, Kei, Shimizu Ikari, and finally, Goto. Jinwoo's attention was immediately drawn to one man standing at a distance. He had heard about Goto Ryuji before, but had never seen him in person. Meanwhile, across the gym, a Japanese hunter named Akari asked Hanekawa about Jinwoo's identity. Hanekawa responded, explaining that he was South Korea's newest rank hunter, having recently awakened to his powers. Goto Ryuji had also taken notice of Jinwoo and speculated about his abilities. He initially assumed that Jinwoo might be an assassin-type hunter. However, if that were the case, his presence wouldn't be so easily detectable. This led Ryuji to conclude that Jinwoo must be an extraordinarily skilled assassin. Hanekawa, overhearing his thoughts, clarified that Jinwoo was actually classified as a mage hunter. Ryuji found this hard to believe, insisting that it seemed impossible given his aura. However, Hanekawa reaffirmed that the official records confirmed him as a mage. Elsewhere, Lim Tae-gyu noticed Jinwoo and asked Cha Haein if he was the hunter responsible for disrupting Min Sung's debut. As she turned her gaze toward Jinwoo, Haein couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was affecting the atmosphere in an unusual way. Meanwhile, two Japanese hunters, Kei and Ishida, were also discussing Jinwoo. Ishida pointed him out, mentioning that he was Korea's 10th rank hunter. However, Kei showed little interest, stating that he felt sick just being surrounded by so many S-rank hunters. He then turned his attention to Heian, noting her refined sense of smell and comparing it to his own. She constantly covered her nose with a handkerchief, a habit he found interesting. He briefly considered speaking to her but hesitated, worried she might misinterpret his intentions. He regretted not learning Korean before the trip. The fight between Yoonho and Dongwook continued, their powerful clashes drawing attention from the onlookers. Observing the match, Hanekawa turned to Goto Ryuji and questioned whether these hunters were truly considered South Korea's strongest. She found their performance underwhelming and remarked that they seemed mediocre at best. The discussion between Ryuji and Hanekawa continued as they observed the South Korean hunters. Hanekawa expressed her opinion, stating that after closely watching their past raids, she was no longer impressed by the S-rank hunters. However, Ryuji disagreed, pointing out that there was at least one remarkable hunter among them, Cha Hae-in. He believed that she, along with Chairman Go, could give Japan's top hunters a serious challenge. As they spoke, a South Korean hunter approached Hanekawa. He addressed her as Mrs. Interpreter and questioned if she truly believed that South Korea's S-rank hunters were average. He also noted that she probably assumed no one around her understood Japanese. However, he revealed that he had studied the language in high school, making it his second language. His companion, standing beside him, cheered him on, calling him boss and encouraging him. Curious about the hunter's identity, Hanekawa asked who he was. His companion proudly introduced him as Park Jung-soo, an A-rank hunter and the guildmaster of the Knights Guild. Hanekawa admitted that she had never heard of him, which irritated his companion Yoon-tae. He quickly clarified that Jung-soo was an A-rank, not an S-rank, which might explain why she was unfamiliar with him. He then added that the Knights Guild was one of the 5 major guilds in South Korea and had the highest number of A-rank hunters. Jung-soo, however, gestured for Yoon-tae to stop boasting, but the conversation continued. Hanekawa asked if they would be participating in the upcoming Jeju Island raid. She had heard that only S-rank hunters were allowed to join. Ryuji, now intrigued, asked her to explain further. Yoon-tae immediately defended Jung-soo, stating that he was part of the defense team responsible for securing the island's perimeter. Hanekawa responded in a neutral tone, saying it was good to know. However, she added that assigning an important task to an A-rank hunter wouldn't be wise. Her words further agitated Yoon-tae, but before he could respond, Ryuji turned to Hanekawa and warned her to be more respectful in her speech. Despite the tension, Jung-soo remained composed. He told Hanekawa to stop underestimating him just because she was an interpreter. Now slightly irritated, Hanekawa challenged him, asking if he wanted to prove himself. She then revealed that she wasn't just an interpreter, but an A-rank hunter as well. She smirked and questioned if he was afraid to take on someone like her. With that, she removed her suit, unleashing a powerful aura that caused the surrounding hunters to take notice. Jung-soo, unfazed, sighed and asked her to stop provoking him. He was about to walk away when Hanekawa sarcastically asked if he was a non-combatant hunter, implying that his refusal to fight meant he lacked real battle experience. This remark finally pushed Jung-soo over the edge and he accepted the challenge. However, he proposed a simple rule: the first person to grab their opponent's wrist would be the winner. Hanekawa understood that even if she launched an attack, the fight would end the moment her wrist was caught. She realized that this match would be more about strategy than brute force. As they prepared, Hanekawa observed Jung-soo's stance. He stood calmly with one hand in his pocket, radiating confidence. He reassured her that he would only take his hand out when it was time to grab her wrist. Hanekawa noted that he must be incredibly fast if he was that self-assured. Without wasting time, she charged at Jung-soo, launching a rapid series of attacks. However, he easily dodged every single strike, his movements smooth and precise. Frustrated, Hanekawa became determined to wipe the smug look off his face. She went for another attack, but with a well-timed kick, Jung-soo knocked her hand away, halting her momentum. Jung-soo calmly stated that he hadn't hit her. It was just a small push. Hanekawa, annoyed, sarcastically apologized and mocked his accent. She also made fun of his torn pants, implying that he was trying too hard to look cool. Suddenly, she lunged at him again, thinking she had found an opening. However, before she could react, Jong-soo swiftly grabbed her wrist. The match was over. Hanakawa froze, not understanding how he had moved so fast. Holding her wrist firmly, Jong-soo looked at her and repeated her earlier words mockingly. He pointed out that she seemed inexperienced in one-on-one fights. He explained that in South Korea, hunters sometimes had to fight their own kind, and in extreme cases even kill them. Unlike magic beasts, humans didn't move predictably. If she couldn't anticipate her opponent's next move, she wouldn't survive. To emphasize his point, he added that if he had been holding a sword instead of her wrist, he would have cut her throat by now. Hanakawa pulled her hand away, visibly irritated by his words. Ryuji, stepping in to break the tension, thanked them for the match. He then turned to Hanakawa and instructed her to deliver his message to the rest of the group. In an effort to strengthen trust between the two countries, Ryuji proposed a sparring session between S-rank hunters, following the same rules as the match between Jong-soo and Hanakawa. Chairman Go entered the conversation and immediately approved of the idea, adding that it would be a valuable experience. However, he pointed out that mage-type and non-combatant hunters should be excluded, since it would be difficult to determine a clear winner in their case. Baek Yoon-ho then suggested additional rules to make the match more structured. He proposed that grabbing an opponent's wrist, back, or knocking them down should result in an automatic win. Additionally, instead of one-on-one duels, multiple hunters should participate in a group battle. Once Hanakawa translated these new conditions to Ryuji, he took a moment to analyze the situation. He recognized that taking out even one person early in the fight could drastically change the outcome. He also realized that assassin punch hunters would have a major advantage under these rules. Despite this, he agreed to the proposal, responding confidently, "All right, sounds good." With the rules set, the teams were finalized. Representing South Korea were S-rank hunters Baek Yoon-ho, Ma Dong-wook, Cha Hae-in, and Lim Tae-gyu. On the Japanese side, the selected S-rank hunters were Tanaka Kenzo, Hashino Minoru, Kumamoto Atsushi, and Tawada Kene. The stage was set for an intense showdown. As the battle was about to begin, Jinwoo noticed something interesting. Goto Ryuji himself was not participating in the sparring match. This made him wonder if Ryuji simply wanted to observe the strength of South Korea's top hunters firsthand. He also realized that fights between S-rank hunters were incredibly rare, making this an opportunity he was glad to witness. Kenzo, one of the Japanese hunters, analyzed his opponents, believing he had a decent grasp of Dongwook and Baek Yoon-ho's abilities from their earlier battles. However, he had a strong suspicion that Baek Yoon-ho was still keeping something hidden. Meanwhile, Tawada assumed that since this was a 4-on-4 fight, her opponent would likely be Cha Hae-in, the only female hunter on the opposing team. On the other side, Lim Tae-gyu silently hoped that the Japanese hunters wouldn't be too ruthless, despite knowing how formidable they were. Ma Dong-wook, eager for the fight, grinned widely and urged everyone to begin. It was clear that the South Korean team was more than ready. Kenzo smirked, intrigued by Dong-wook's ability to enlarge his body. He appreciated straightforward battles and found excitement in a test of pure strength. "Nice. Very nice. I like that you keep it simple," he remarked, releasing a powerful aura. As if responding to his energy, Dong-wook also unleashed his power. Both fighters then charged at each other with full force, fists colliding in an explosion of energy, each determined to prove their strength. At the same time, Minoru made his move against Tae-gyu, who was caught off guard by his opponent's incredible speed. Tae-gyu immediately recognized that Minoru specialized in close-quarters combat, which put him at a disadvantage. However, he was confident in his own strengths, specifically his ability to create distance. Without hesitation, he released a powerful magic arrow, aiming not only at Minoru, but also at his teammates. As Minoru dodged the attack, he was stunned to realize that it was a strategy to disrupt their entire formation. Watching from a distance, Atsushi immediately understood the tactic. "So, he's a ranger," he muttered, realizing that the South Korean team had no intention of sticking to one-on-one fights. Kenzo quickly assessed the situation and concluded that their only viable option was for Minoru to take down Taegyu as fast as possible before more damage was done. From the sidelines, Chairman Go observed the battle with keen interest. He noted that the facility had been reinforced with high-quality essence stones designed to withstand powerful attacks. Normally, an average hunter would struggle to even leave a dent in the walls. Yet, within mere seconds of the match beginning, the entire area had been torn apart by the sheer force of the combatants. He found it unfortunate that these young hunters, despite their incredible talent, were often sent into battles they weren't fully prepared for. Meanwhile, Baek Yoonho was deep in thought. He understood that their opponents were among the strongest S ranks in the world, and this match wasn't just about skill, it was about survival. He knew they had to be prepared not just to grab an opponent's wrist, but, if necessary, to break it. His opponent, Atsushi, on the other hand, saw things differently. He believed that following the set rules was pointless. In his mind, the only true law of battle was survival of the fittest. Instead of aiming for Yuno's wrist or back, he planned to strike wherever it would hurt the most. Atsushi made his move, swiftly positioning himself behind Yunoho, preparing for a decisive strike. However, just as he was about to land his attack, he suddenly hesitated and leaped away. Yunoho, puzzled, wondered why his opponent had backed off. Is he afraid? He thought to himself. Meanwhile, Atsushi clenched his fists in frustration, questioning whether he truly had the killer instinct needed to survive in this world. The battle raged on, each hunter pushing their limits, their every move shaping the outcome of this high-stakes confrontation. As Yoonho observed his opponent, he couldn't help but question the man's true nature. Was he someone with great strategic thinking, or was he simply a coward avoiding unnecessary risks? This led him to reflect on his previous belief that the desire to fight was essential for a hunter. Perhaps he had been wrong. However, another thought quickly surfaced. It seemed that Ryuji was deliberately setting up fights among the S-rank hunters. He wasn't just letting them test their abilities, he was using them as a means to evaluate Atsushi's strength, to see if he was ready for the upcoming battle against the ants. Realizing they were merely being used as test subjects, Yoonho decided he wouldn't hold back anymore. He wanted to give his opponents a glimpse of his true strength. As his form began to change, Atsushi noticed it immediately. A sense of fear crept over him, and he hesitated, his body screaming at him to retreat. But before he could act, Yoonho launched forward at an astonishing speed, calling Atsushi a coward and expressing his disappointment that such a man was considered among the top hunters. His attack came down in an instant, barely missing its target as Atsushi dodged at the last possible second. Elsewhere, Jiangsu watched the unfolding battle with fascination. He couldn't help but remark that this was no ordinary fight. It was a monstrous clash, one that made his own previous match seem insignificant. However, Yun-tae disagreed. He dismissed the idea, insisting that Jiangsu had been just as impressive in his earlier battle. Before their conversation could continue, a loud impact resonated through the area. Dongbuk had been defeated. Kenzo, standing tall over him, smirked and confidently declared himself the stronger one between the two. Dongbuk, still in shock, lay on the ground, unable to believe that he had just been overpowered so decisively. He had never experienced such a crushing defeat before. Meanwhile, another battle was reaching its climax. Taegyu had been completely overwhelmed by Minoru, who now stood victorious after sending his opponent crashing into a wall. Without hesitation, Minoru announced his triumph. Yoonho turned his attention to the remaining opponents, questioning if they now saw him as their next target. He knew what they were thinking, that he would be easier to defeat than the others. With a calm but firm voice, he told them they had underestimated him. Meanwhile, on another side of the battlefield, Tawada was struggling against Heian. Initially, Tawada believed Heian relied solely on speed, but that assumption was quickly proven wrong. She couldn't predict Heian's movements at all. It was as if Heian was moving in an entirely different rhythm, one that was unreadable. Then, Heian's aura suddenly intensified, sending a chill down Tawada's spine. At that moment, she recalled the infamous nickname given to Heian, the Dancer. It was a name earned due to the way she effortlessly eliminated her enemies, her movements appearing more like a graceful dance than a brutal fight. However, Heian had always hated that name and had it banned. Before Tawada could react, Heian launched into a relentless assault, striking with rapid precision. Tawada attempted to counterattack, but Heian disrupted her rhythm with a single, well-placed slash, knocking off her cap. Then, in an instant, Heian vanished from view only to reappear behind her. A light tap on her back signaled the end of the battle. Tawada had lost. Heian didn't waste any time celebrating. She had to move quickly. She needed to assist Yun-ho. However, just as she turned to leave, Atsushi appeared behind her, ready to strike. He had been waiting for this moment, hoping that with Yun-ho occupied, he could eliminate Heian without interference. But before he could make his move, Heian reacted with an overwhelming burst of attacks, striking him repeatedly in the face. The watching Japanese hunters were left speechless. Fujishima could only compare her assault to the rapid-fire speed of a Gatling gun. Ishida, watching closely, tried to count the number of punches but couldn't keep up. He estimated that she had struck Atsushi at least 10 to 14 times in the blink of an eye. Atsushi staggered back, his face bloodied and unrecognizable. However, something was different about him now. His teammates immediately noticed the shift. His body language changed, his rational mind slipping away. Kei muttered that Atsushi had entered a dangerous state. When enraged, he became an entirely different person, unable to control himself. Ishida added that after his rage subsided, he would remember nothing. This was why Atsushi had never been considered suitable for elite strike squads. Despite his immense power, he lacked the ability to work with others, even struggling to clear an A-rank gate as part of a team. Alone, he could handle B-rank threats with ease, but in coordinated battles, he was a liability. Heian, on the other hand, was taken aback by the sheer force of her own attack. She had reacted instinctively. Watching from afar, Ryuji observed the situation carefully. If Atsushi lost control completely and attacked one of the South Korean hunters, they would have no choice but to stop him immediately. However, he decided to wait. This was still a test, and he wanted to see what would happen next. Hanakawa, standing nearby, questioned whether this was the right moment to intervene. If Atsushi went on a rampage, the destruction would be costly, and they couldn't afford unnecessary damage. As the battle continued, Heian barely managed to dodge another attack, but she quickly realized that her opponent had become far more dangerous. His speed had increased dramatically, and before she knew it, he was right behind her, closing in for a devastating strike. But just as the attack was about to land, an explosion of energy erupted between them, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Atsushi froze, caught off guard by the sudden force. Standing at the center of the commotion was none other than Sung Jinwoo. He had intervened. Jinwoo calmly assessed the situation. He apologized for stepping in, but made it clear that things had gone too far. This was no longer just a sparring match. It had turned into something else entirely. Holding Atsushi's foot with one hand and steadying Heian with the other, he demonstrated complete control over the situation. Heian looked up at him in surprise, realizing just how effortlessly he had stopped the fight. Still seething with rage, Atsushi cursed Jinwoo and attempted another reckless attack, but it was pointless. With little effort, Jinwoo dodged and reversed the momentum, slamming Atsushi straight into the ground. The impact left a crater beneath him. Ryuji, who had been closely observing Jinwoo's movements, narrowed his eyes. He turned to Hanakawa and asked if Sung Jinwoo was truly classified as a mage hunter. Hanakawa hesitated before confirming that according to official records, yes, that was the classification given to him. But after witnessing what had just happened, Ryuji knew there was much more to Sung Jinwoo than the reports suggested. Ryuji decided that the best way to confirm his suspicions was to check firsthand. Meanwhile, Jinwoo swiftly restrained Atsushi, pinning him to the ground with firm control. After assessing the situation, he suggested to Heian that they accept the match as a loss for the South Korean team, a conclusion that was readily agreed upon. It became evident that Yun-ho had already faced defeat, now firmly held by Kenzo. Despite his exceptional abilities, he recognized the overwhelming strength of the Japanese hunters. Even if he chose to unleash his transformation, the gap in power seemed insurmountable. Before he could dwell further on his limitations, Hanakawa approached, calling out to Jinwoo and informing him that Ryuji wished to speak with him. As Jinwoo turned his attention toward Ryuji, the atmosphere grew tense. Ryuji confirmed Jinwoo's name, ensuring he was indeed the hunter he had heard about. Without hesitation, an intense aura radiated from Ryuji, signaling his intent to fight. He issued a challenge, making it clear that he wanted a one-on-one duel. The moment froze as their gazes locked, anticipation filling the air. Jinwoo immediately sensed Ryuji's eagerness for battle. Even without a translator, the message was clear. Ryuji wanted to test his abilities. Though uncertain of Ryuji's true motives, Jinwoo saw this as an opportunity to measure his own growth, especially after his experiences in the Demon Castle. Ryuji, observing Jinwoo's composed demeanor, was momentarily caught off guard when he noticed a subtle smile forming on his opponent's face. This reaction puzzled him. Few hunters had ever dared to smile in his presence. Hanekawa translated Jinwoo's response, stating that he was willing to fight but with one condition. Ryuji had to use his full strength. The demand took Ryuji by surprise, his expression shifting between amusement and irritation. The sheer confidence in Jinwoo's words made him question whether his opponent was being reckless or if there was something more beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Lim Taegu, watching from the sidelines, struggled to grasp what was happening. Haein, equally taken aback, found it difficult to believe what she had just heard. Realizing that the match would proceed, Ryuji acknowledged the challenge. With an S-rank healer present, he reasoned that injuries wouldn't be a major concern. He signaled the healer to stand by, ensuring they would assist anyone wounded, including himself. With a confident gesture, he pointed at Jinwoo and warned that the healer's aid would be needed shortly. From a distance, Dongwil observed with curiosity and asked Haein if Jinwoo was the rumored 10th S-rank hunter. He wondered if Jinwoo was truly going to face Ryuji in direct combat. Dongwil muttered to himself about Jinwoo's audacity, unsure whether it was bravery or recklessness. Meanwhile, Haein reflected on Jinwoo's previous battles, recalling his remarkable victory over an A-rank dungeon boss and an overwhelming number of high-level orcs. Yunho, standing beside her, noticed her unease and asked if she felt comfortable being around the Japanese hunters. Haein admitted that she couldn't always shield herself from their presence, especially with the upcoming mission on Jeju Island. She then turned the conversation back to Jinwoo, inquiring about his relationship with Yunho. He quickly confirmed that he knew Jinwoo well. Curious, she questioned why Yunho wasn't intervening to prevent Jinwoo from facing Ryuji. Yunho admitted that under normal circumstances, he would have stepped in, given Ryuji's reputation. However, he had chosen not to, his reasoning aligning with Haeyeon's own thoughts. His words caught her off guard, making her pause for a moment. Yunho smiled knowingly, suggesting that she too was looking forward to witnessing the battle unfold. As Jinwoo prepared himself, the fight was about to begin. He barely had time to utter a word before Ryuji launched his first attack. Without hesitation, Ryuji's hand moved with lightning speed, unleashing a powerful strike that sent shockwaves through the area. The impact caused a resounding explosion, but Jinwoo dodged effortlessly, narrowly avoiding the devastating force. He realized that Ryuji had wasted no time, attacking the very moment he declared the match had begun. Ryuji looked at his hand in confusion, unable to comprehend how he had missed his strike. He had been told that Jinwoo was a mage-type hunter, but something about his movements felt different. His agility, his silent footsteps, none of it aligned with what was expected from a mage. While others might be fooled by the assumption, Ryuji was not convinced. He was determined to expose Jinwoo and reveal his true nature. Jinwoo, on the other hand, recognized that Ryuji was an entirely different caliber of S-rank hunter. However, he was still confident in his ability to dodge the attacks. Ryuji's strikes came relentlessly, one after another, yet Jinwoo evaded each one effortlessly, a smile forming on his face. The sight of Jinwoo's amusement only fueled Ryuji's frustration. Nearby, another Japanese hunter, Izawa, asked Kenzu if they should intervene, but Kenzu observed that Ryuji was taking the fight seriously. Lim Taegyo watched in awe, commenting on how intense their battle was. Even with his trained eyes, it was difficult to track their movements. Dongwook was equally impressed, noting that despite facing one of Japan's strongest hunters, Jinwoo was avoiding every attack with ease. However, Haeyeon saw something more. Jinwoo was not merely dodging, he was allowing Ryuji to continue his assault, studying his attacks and movements. Jong-in, returning from a brief break, noticed the commotion and remarked that it looked like an interesting fight had broken out in his absence. Meanwhile, Ryuji started to question whether Jinwoo was simply lucky or if he possessed an ability that allowed him to anticipate attacks. It became clear that unless he gave his all, he might never land a solid hit. Determined, he resolved to unleash his full strength and eliminate Jinwoo. In that instant, Jinwoo's system alerted him of an approaching enemy with murderous intent. Before he could react, a sharp cut appeared on Jinwoo's cheek as Ryuji launched another devastating strike. The sheer force sent shockwaves through the air. However, Ryuji was stunned when Jinwoo effortlessly caught his hand mid-strike. Realizing the danger, Jinwoo knew that if he continued to hold back, he might end up in a dire situation similar to his past battles. Ryuji was shocked not only by Jinwoo's strength, but also by his precise control. He realized that Jinwoo could have grabbed his wrist, disabling his attack, but instead he chose to hold his hand, sending a clear message. Enraged, Ryuji felt as if he was being toyed with. As tension built, both fighters released their powerful auras, ready to strike with everything they had. The hunters watching were overwhelmed by the sheer pressure radiating from them. Just before they could engage again, Yunho and Kei intervened. Hashino held Ryuji back, while Kei quickly constructed an ice wall between them to forcefully halt the fight. Yunho, now in control of the situation, pointed out that things had gone too far. He reminded Jinwoo that Ryuji was responsible for leading the Japanese forces in the coming days, and any unnecessary injuries could have serious consequences. Hyen agreed, emphasizing that no one could afford to deal with the aftermath if Ryuji were seriously harmed. Seeing the situation escalate, Hanikawa announced that the sparring session was over. As the tension settled, Yunho turned to Jinwoo, asking if he had crossed any lines. Jinwoo simply smiled, assuring him that everything was fine. Dongwook, still amazed by what he had witnessed, praised Jinwoo's performance. Despite facing one of the most powerful hunters, Jinwoo had emerged with nothing but a minor cut. He then mentioned that his guild had plenty of mages but lacked fighters, suggesting that Jinwoo should consider joining them if he wasn't already affiliated with a guild. Jong-in, overhearing the conversation, reaffirmed that Jinwoo was a mage-type hunter, leaving Jongwoo momentarily speechless. Meanwhile, Jinwoo reflected on his experience. He had now crossed paths with several top-ranking figures: Chairman Go, Choi Jong-in, Cha Hyen, Baek Yunho, and now Goto Ryuji. Even among these elite hunters, none had noticed his hidden soldiers lurking in the shadows, not even Ryuji. Suddenly, Jinwoo turned to Chairman Go and directly asked if he wanted him to participate in the Jeju Island raid. Taken aback, Chairman Go realized that Jinwoo had already made his decision. As the realization sank in, Hanakawa called out Ryuji's name, concern evident in her voice. She saw him standing still, drenched in sweat, his face pale after his encounter with Jinwoo. Back at the White Tiger Guild office, Baek Yunho sat in silence, letting out a deep sigh. After witnessing Jinwoo's overwhelming strength firsthand, he couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and anticipation for what was to come. Yunho had always known that hunters could grow stronger, but witnessing it firsthand was something else entirely. He couldn't shake the thought of Jinwoo's true potential. If this hunter continued to develop at such a rapid pace, his value would be immeasurable. While Yunho had initially hoped to recruit Jinwoo into his guild, he realized that such an effort might have been futile. However, there were always other ways to build a connection with someone so talented. Deciding to take a different approach, he checked his phone and reviewed the official list of hunters set to participate in the upcoming Search and Destroy mission. To his surprise, Jinwoo's name was nowhere to be found. He frowned, puzzled by the omission. It didn't make sense to leave out such a powerful hunter. Meanwhile, in his hotel room, Goto Ryuji was on a call with Sugimoto Reiji, the vice guildmaster of the Blade Guild and an S-rank hunter. During their conversation, Ryuji casually mentioned that South Korea seemed to have an unexpectedly strong hunter. Sugimoto laughed at the thought, dismissing the idea that anyone there could rival him. However, Ryuji wasn't so sure. He had seen something different, something that couldn't be ignored. Curious, Sugimoto asked for the hunter's name. Ryuji revealed that it was Sung Jinwoo, a recently evaluated S-rank hunter who had undergone a second awakening. Sugimoto found this odd considering that Jinwoo's name wasn't on the official list of participants. When Ryuji pressed for an explanation, Sugimoto explained that South Korea had already selected their representatives for the Jeju Island raid. The team included Choi Jong-in, Ma Dong-wook, Bak Yoon-ho, Cha Hye-in, Lim Tae-gyu, and Min Byung-gu, some of the country's strongest hunters. It was hard to believe that Jinwoo had been left out of such an important mission. Ryuji couldn't fathom why Chairman Go would make such a decision. Sugimoto reassured him that there was no need to worry. With 16 S-rank hunters participating in total, the operation would be a success regardless. Accepting the explanation, Ryuji decided to set aside his concerns. He ended the call, making a mental note to reach out to Sugimoto again once the raid began. Far from the bustling city, deep within Halasan's Bungnok Crater Lake, the Ant Queen surveyed her kingdom. The colony had reached a breaking point. With food supplies running dangerously low, the weaker ants had begun devouring each other in desperation. The queen knew they couldn't stay confined to the island any longer. To ensure survival, she made a decision. A new soldier would be born, one unlike any before. Before her lay an enormous egg, pulsating with energy. This would be the first of a new breed of warriors, one destined to lead the colony and strike fear into their enemies. As the egg trembled, the queen commanded the emerging soldier to consume everything in sight, to grow stronger, and to instill terror in all who opposed them. The moment the creature broke free, it let out an ear-splitting screech, shaking the very foundation of the ant kingdom. The queen watched with satisfaction as an overwhelming aura spread throughout the colony. This was her child, and it would be unstoppable. Back in the city, Jinwoo returned home with his mother and younger sister Gina. The familiar sight of their apartment greeted them, though it was far messier than he remembered. The place had been left untouched during his time in the Demon Castle, and it showed. Gina groaned at the mess while Jinwoo playfully pinched her cheek. Their mother, smiling, reminded them that it had been 4 years since she last did any housework. She suggested they clean together, and Jinwoo agreed with a chuckle. As they worked, his mother commented on how worn down the apartment had become. The layers of dust and grime hinted at years of neglect. While tidying up, she suddenly asked if there had been any news about Jinwoo's father. Her voice held a quiet hope, but Jinwoo could only shake his head. He wished he had an answer for her, but there had been nothing. As he continued cleaning, he found himself lost in thought. If his mother knew just how much he had changed, how he had followed in his father's footsteps, he wondered what she would think. Jinwoo knew that his mother's decision to remain in their old apartment had nothing to do with money. Even though he was now wealthier than most people could ever hope to be, she refused to move. The reason was simple. She was still waiting for his father. No matter how much time passed, she held on to the belief that one day he would return. This thought lingered in Jinwoo's mind. He realized how much his mother and sister needed him. Though he had gained immense power, there were things beyond strength that weighed on his heart. As he stood in their home, his thoughts gradually shifted toward the upcoming Jeju Island raid. Meanwhile, a press conference was being held to address the growing threat on Jeju Island. A researcher presented a shocking discovery. The ants inhabiting the island were evolving at an incredible speed. A video was shown, documenting the changes that had taken place over time. At the beginning of the infestation, the creatures resembled oversized ants, crawling on all 6 legs. However, images from later missions revealed something alarming. By the time of the 3rd Search and Destroy mission, the ants had begun standing upright, their bodies adapting to a more human-like posture. Their heads had even shrunk, allowing for greater agility. The most disturbing development, however, was the appearance of wings. The researcher confirmed that the ants were now capable of flight, making them an even greater threat. This was the primary reason why South Korea and Japan had agreed to form a joint team for the mission. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Some attendees voiced their concerns, admitting that even the most skilled hunters might hesitate to face such terrifying creatures. Despite the fear surrounding the mission, there was also admiration for those who had stepped forward. One person in the audience mentioned that a retired hunter had even volunteered to join the fight, earning the respect of many. Elsewhere, Jinwoo was reading through online comments, most of which were filled with criticism. Many people questioned why his name wasn't on the list for the Jeju Island raid. Some mocked him, claiming he was still the same weak E-rank hunter he had once been. Others pointed out that even a retired hunter had joined the mission, yet Jinwoo was nowhere to be seen. One comment in particular stood out. It suggested that Jinwoo had run away after becoming an S-rank, calling it embarrassing. Though he didn't care about the hate, he couldn't help but think about his younger sister, Gina. The last thing he wanted was for her to be affected by the negativity surrounding him. While lost in thought, his phone rang. It was Jinwoo, calling to update him on his living situation. Jinwoo had finally moved out of the motel and found an apartment with his mother's help. He had also secured an office space for their guild and wanted Jinwoo to check it out. When Jinwoo arrived, Jinwoo eagerly explained that a guild needed an official office, so he had chosen a location close to their apartments. Looking around, Jinwoo noted that the space seemed too large for just the two of them. However, Jinwoo reminded him that a guild required at least 3 hunters, a guild master, a vice guild master, and 1 additional member. Realizing he would need to recruit more hunters, Jinwoo briefly considered simply filling the position with any available candidate. But before he could dwell on the thought, Jinwoo handed him a business card. A foreigner had been looking for him and would remain in Korea until July 17th. Jinwoo found it odd that a stranger knew of him and wanted to meet. Just as he processed this information, an uneasy feeling crept over him. Without warning, he suddenly announced that he had to go home. Jinwoo, caught off guard, asked what was happening, but before he could get an answer, Jinwoo vanished, using his teleportation ability. The scene shifted to a dark alleyway near Jinwoo's neighborhood. A thug was holding a knife to a young girl, threatening her not to scream. He had a twisted grin on his face as he taunted her, enjoying the fear in her eyes. He boasted about how crime was rampant in the area, making it easy to do whatever he pleased. Just then, a voice spoke from behind him. Someone casually agreed with his statement, adding that they too enjoyed the neighborhood. The thug, startled, turned to see who had interrupted. Jinwoo stood there, his expression unreadable. The thug sneered, questioning why he was interfering. With a smug attitude, he revealed that he didn't need a reason. He simply found hurting others to be fun. Without hesitation, he lunged at Jinwoo, his knife flashing under the dim streetlights. Grabbing Jinwoo's shoulder, he stabbed him multiple times, expecting his victim to crumble. It was the same thrill he always felt when preying on someone weaker than him. But this time, things wouldn't go the way he expected. The blade had no effect. Jinwoo calmly spoke, almost as if reminiscing. Once someone gets a taste of something, returning to an ordinary life isn't easy. Before the thug could comprehend what was happening, his legs were suddenly slashed out from under him. As he collapsed, trembling, realization dawned. This was no ordinary man. The girl wasted no time. She turned and fled, disappearing into the night. Meanwhile, Jinwoo loomed over the fallen criminal, his voice steady. He gave him a choice: surrender to the authorities by midnight or face the consequences. As he spoke, a shadow emerged beside him, a high-orc soldier, standing silently, awaiting orders. Jinwoo instructed the shadow to eliminate the thug if he failed to turn himself in. Yet, in a rare display of mercy, he added that he genuinely hoped the man would choose to live. However, he wasn't entirely sure if his shadow soldier had much patience. As he walked home, Jinwoo's mind shifted to the Jeju Island raid, which was set to begin the next day. Elsewhere, Goto Ryuji sat with his phone in hand, his fingers trembling. He couldn't shake the feeling that had haunted him ever since his battle with Jinwoo. During that fight, for the first time in his life, he had truly felt death looming over him. He had trained relentlessly, refined his skills, but no amount of preparation had erased the overwhelming presence he had encountered. Meanwhile, a helicopter carried elite hunters toward Jeju Island. The mission was about to begin. From the distance, Mount Halasan loomed, a silent witness to the battles that were about to unfold. At sea, an armada of ships moved into position. Fleets were deployed strategically, one near China's coast, another near Taiwan, and the largest force north of Jeju Island. This was a large-scale operation, one that would determine the fate of countless lives. On board one of the vessels, a hunter named Jung-soo stood with his team. He reminded them to stay alert as the ants could attack at any moment. Yoon-tae, one of the hunters, asked whether their strategy would actually work. Jung-soo admitted that there was no way to know for sure, but their job was to stand guard. If anything happened, they had to prevent the flying ants from reaching the mainland. Yoon-tae, confident in his leader, declared that he would follow Jung-soo to the ends of the earth. Around them, the rest of the guild members stood ready, waiting for their orders. Elsewhere in the Fame Guild, a hunter named Dong-woo was preparing to depart. He exchanged words with the vice guild master, who reminded him to stay safe. Although their role as the defense team meant they were on standby, she insisted that they remain prepared. Dong-wook, appreciating her leadership, thanked her for managing the guild so well. Though she downplayed her responsibilities, he knew that without her, their guild wouldn't be where it was today. As he bid farewell, she reminded him to return in one piece. Meanwhile, another conversation took place. A hunter named Taegu was angrily speaking on the phone, demanding that Min-sung, a high-value hunter, be moved to safety. He feared that the ants would attack sooner than expected, but the response on the other end was clear. The troops were already deployed and couldn't be recalled. Frustrated, Taegu could only tell them to stay safe and find cover. In another part of the operation, hunters from various guilds were being stationed at strategic points. Among them was the Fiend Guild, with Min-sung at the center of media attention. He saw this as an opportunity, knowing that being in the spotlight could boost his reputation. Defensive squads were positioned across the island, including elite A-rank hunters and their teams. The plan was clear. No matter what happened, they had to ensure that the mainland remained secure. As the mission officially began, all eyes were on Jeju Island, where the true battle was about to unfold. As the mission continued to unfold, preparations were in full swing. Among those assigned to the operation were members of the White Tiger Guild's elite strike squad, including experienced hunters like Park Hee-jin, Yoon Ki-jung, and Go Ming-hwan. In addition to active hunters, a number of retired ones had also chosen to participate in the mission, such as Lee Ju-hee and the seasoned veteran Mr. Song. There were even individuals who had awakened their abilities in the past, but had opted not to pursue a career as hunters. Now, with the nation facing a crisis, many of them had stepped forward. Out of the 50,000 awakened individuals in South Korea, nearly 5,000 had decided to join the battle, making up a significant portion of the defense force. Meanwhile, a separate group of South Korea's most powerful S-rank hunters was aboard a helicopter heading toward Mount Halasan. Among them was a man who introduced himself as a cameraman from a well-known news agency that specialized in covering hunter events. His role was to document the upcoming battle and broadcast the footage across the nation. However, he explained that the transmission would have a 10-minute delay, allowing editors to filter out anything deemed too sensitive or distressing for the public to see. The presence of a cameraman on such a dangerous mission raised some eyebrows among the hunters. One of them, Yoon Ho, expressed his surprise and wondered aloud about the reasoning behind this decision. The thought of a non-combatant being on the battlefield seemed reckless to him. However, Dong-wook, another S-rank hunter, remarked that a truly successful raid wasn't just about eliminating threats, it was also about ensuring that the people they protected had hope to hold on to. He acknowledged the risk but advised the cameraman to look after himself. The cameraman then reassured them that he wasn't completely defenseless. Despite working as a journalist, he was also an awakened individual with an A-rank license. In South Korea, many people with awakened abilities chose not to become professional hunters, instead opting for other career paths. The cameraman was one of those individuals, having previously covered dangerous events such as dungeon breaks. However, despite his past experience, he couldn't help but feel nervous about this particular mission. His hands trembled slightly as he held his equipment, revealing his unease. Noticing this, Dong-wook offered him a few reassuring words, suggesting that the Hunters Association must have confidence in their chances of success, otherwise they wouldn't have allowed a civilian to accompany them. The cameraman seemed to relax a little at this sentiment, thanking him for the encouragement. Yoon Ho, meanwhile, reflected on the significance of the upcoming battle. He recognized that this was the first time an S-rank raid would be broadcast to the public. It was also likely the last time something like this would happen. Previous attempts to reclaim Jeju Island had ended in disaster, and the anticipation surrounding this fourth attempt was at an all-time high. The people watching from home were hoping for a decisive victory. He understood the pressure of their expectations and silently acknowledged that if they failed again, it could spell catastrophe not just for South Korea, but for the entire region. Despite the weight of responsibility, Yoon-ho remained composed, reminding himself that the world needed heroes now more than ever. Elsewhere in the helicopter, Byung-gu, an experienced healer, engaged in a brief conversation with Yoon-ho. He explained that he had decided to join the raid out of concern for Yoon-ho's reckless tendencies. Over the years, he had noticed that whenever Yoon-ho spotted a dangerous monster, he would charge into battle without hesitation. Byung-gu worried that without a healer by his side, Yoon-ho might not make it out alive. Yoon-ho, clearly irritated by the remark, denied being that impulsive, though his teammates smirked knowingly at the friendly banter. Seated nearby, Hae-in seemed to be lost in thought. After a moment, she asked Yoon-ho if he had seen Jinwoo before departing for the mission. He shook his head, saying he hadn't. When he returned the question asking why she was curious, she hesitated for a brief moment before simply replying that it was nothing important. As the helicopter neared Jeju Island, the atmosphere grew more serious. The hunters could see the towering form of Mount Halasan in the distance, its dark silhouette standing ominously against the sky. The time for preparation was over. The battle was about to begin. Byung-gu, gripping his weapon tightly, felt his hands tremble. The island ahead of them had claimed the lives of countless hunters before. Now it was their turn to face the terror that awaited. The operation to reclaim Jeju Island had begun, and the atmosphere was tense. The Japanese S-rank hunters, led by their strongest members, moved cautiously through the ruins of Jeju City. Once a bustling metropolis, it had now become nothing more than a ghost town. Skyscrapers stood abandoned, their glass windows shattered, and the streets were filled with the eerie silence of a place long devoid of human life. As the hunters advanced, they noticed something unusual. Piles of ant corpses scattered along the roads. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that these ants hadn't been killed by humans. Instead, they had been cannibalized by their own kind. This unsettling discovery suggested that a stronger predator lurked within the ranks of the ant colony. The Japanese hunters wasted no time. Their leader called out through his communication device, signaling his team to begin their operation. As the call signs were confirmed one by one, the hunters released an overwhelming surge of mana, sending waves of energy rippling through the atmosphere. This immense burst of power served a single purpose: to lure the ants out of their nest and into battle. Above them, in a hovering helicopter, the South Korean SR rank hunters observed the situation unfold. The sheer intensity of the mana released by the Japanese team left them momentarily stunned. It was evident that the operation had officially begun. Their leader acknowledged that they had to move quickly. Every second wasted allowed the ants to regroup and strengthen their defenses. Deep within Mount Halasan, the massive crater that served as the heart of the ant colony, the response was immediate. From the dark tunnels, a swarm of ants emerged, their numbers growing rapidly as they rushed toward the surface. A portion of the swarm took to the skies, heading straight for the South Korean helicopter. Recognizing the imminent threat, one of the hunters stepped forward, preparing to intercept the oncoming creatures. With a wave of his hand, he conjured multiple spears of fire, launching them directly at the advancing ants. The flaming projectiles struck their targets with pinpoint accuracy, causing fiery explosions that lit up the sky. Despite the impressive display, the hunter remained composed, knowing that this was only the beginning. However, the attack revealed something concerning. The ants had evolved. Unlike their previous encounters, these creatures displayed an increased resistance to magic. Even the most powerful flames struggled to inflict significant damage. The realization set in that a much greater force would be required to deal with them effectively. Without hesitation, the hunter channeled a far greater amount of mana, summoning an enormous fireball that engulfed the sky. With a single motion, he unleashed it upon the enemy, engulfing them in a sea of flames. Though the attack succeeded in eliminating a large portion of the swarm, it was clear that the battle would not be easily won. As the helicopter continued its approach, one of the hunters made a sudden decision, leaping from the aircraft and descending toward the battlefield. His companions were momentarily taken aback by his reckless action, but they knew he was confident in his abilities. Landing amidst the swarm, he wasted no time in unleashing a fiery explosion that incinerated the surrounding ants. With a smirk, he compared the experience to burning ants with a magnifying glass as a child. But this time, instead of a small flame, he wielded the power of a living inferno. Recognizing that their ally had paved the way, the rest of the team prepared to join him. However, hesitation lingered in the air. Unlike previous attempts to reclaim Jeju Island, this time there were no planned escape routes. Once they entered the battlefield, they would either emerge victorious or perish within the tunnels of the ant nest. Nevertheless, they knew what was at stake. The leader of the South Korean team reminded them of their mission. They had only an hour before the Japanese hunters could no longer hold back the main swarm. Within that time, they had to locate and eliminate the queen. Without further discussion, the team steeled themselves and leaped from the helicopter, diving headfirst into battle. Meanwhile, offshore, another part of the operation was being executed. A massive warship equipped with advanced technology had been stationed to support the hunters. On board, a high-ranking official of the Japanese Blade Guild issued orders to activate specialized jamming signals. The purpose of this technology was simple. By disrupting the queen's ability to communicate with her army, they could weaken the ants' coordination. As soon as the signals were activated, the effect was immediate. The ants, which had previously moved with synchronized precision, suddenly displayed signs of confusion. Without their queen's guidance, their movements became more erratic, providing a crucial advantage to the hunters. Back on the island, various teams engaged in combat. In one section of the battlefield, a group of Japanese hunters fought relentlessly, slashing through wave after wave of ants. Among them, a young but skilled swordsman found himself momentarily overwhelmed before a senior hunter intervened, cutting down an approaching enemy and warning him to stay focused. Another pair of hunters debated whether it would be more efficient to eliminate the ants outright, rather than waiting for the South Koreans to complete their mission. Their conversation was interrupted when one of their allies, known for his unconventional fighting style, gleefully tore the wings off his enemies one by one, treating the battle like a game. Elsewhere, another hunter observed the battle from higher ground. Noticing bursts of fire erupting near the tunnels, he speculated that the South Korean fire mage was responsible. He mused about what might happen if fire and ice were to clash in battle. Beside him, a vast number of ants lay frozen, a testament to his own formidable abilities. Within the ant tunnels, the South Korean team made their way through the labyrinth-like passageways. They acknowledged that the once beautiful Mount Halasan had been reduced to nothing more than a massive ant colony. One of their members took the lead, creating a barrier of flames at the entrance to prevent lower-ranking ants from interfering. With the path secured, he focused on using his fire to map out the tunnel. By casting fireballs into various pathways, he could determine which ones led deeper inside based on how the flames traveled. Finally, he identified the correct path, one that showed no signs of obstruction. With newfound confidence, he signaled his team to proceed. Meanwhile, far away from the battlefield, a young man was training in a quiet park. His system displayed his current stats, showing immense growth in his strength, agility, and intelligence. After completing his run, he noticed that the usually lively park was now deserted. It didn't take long for him to realize why. Most people were likely glued to their screens, watching the Jeju Island raid unfold. Though he acknowledged the power of those participating, he couldn't shake the feeling that things might not go as planned. For now, he continued his training, knowing that if the situation demanded it, he would soon be called upon to act. The South Korean hunters continued their advance through the dark tunnels, moving cautiously as they eliminated any remaining ants. A well-placed arrow from Taegyu struck one of the creatures, confirming that only a few remained in the area. The lack of resistance indicated that their earlier assumptions were correct. The majority of the ants had already vacated the tunnels. Taegu studied the creatures, noting that they were unlike anything he had encountered before. Their eyes appeared dull and deteriorated, suggesting that they had adapted to their underground environment. If their vision had weakened, it likely meant they had developed other heightened senses, making them even more dangerous as guards of the deeper tunnels. However, if these were not the Queen's elite protectors, then their mission would be much easier. With their overwhelming firepower, breaking through would not be a challenge. Meanwhile, Byung-gu voiced his unease. He speculated on the Queen's whereabouts, wondering if she had abandoned her colony and fled. However, Young-ho dismissed the idea immediately. The island was completely isolated, and there was no conceivable escape route for the Queen. She had no choice but to remain, which meant they would find her soon. A cameraman accompanied them, carefully adjusting his equipment to capture the dimly lit tunnels. Though the lack of light made filming difficult, he reassured himself that the editing team would enhance the footage later. As they pressed forward, Zhang Yin ignited a small fireball in his palm to illuminate their surroundings. The flickering flames revealed something that made him stop in his tracks: an enormous chamber filled with ant eggs. This was the spawning ground. If the Queen was anywhere nearby, it would be here. He quickly deduced that the ants they had encountered earlier were likely stationed to protect the eggs. Without hesitation, he prepared to incinerate them all. However, Hae-in intervened, noticing something unusual. Among the hundreds of eggs, one stood out, far larger than the rest, and already hatched. Byung-gu's face twisted in horror as he stared at the remains of the broken shell. The sheer size of it sent a chill down his spine. He could only imagine what kind of monstrous creature had emerged from within. Perhaps it was one of the Queen's royal guards. Before he could voice his thoughts, Yoon-ho placed a firm hand on his shoulder, reminding him of their priority, the Queen herself. Everything else was secondary. Despite Yoon-ho's words, an air of unease lingered. The sight of that massive egg had left a deep impression on them all. They couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous than ordinary ants awaited them in the depths of the tunnels. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the Japanese Charlie team was engaged in combat. Shimizu, Fujishima, and Kenzo had been holding their ground, fending off waves of flying ants. Kenzo, now covered in blood, had managed to take down 30 of them, but not without sustaining injuries. His shoulder and waist bore deep wounds from their coordinated attacks. Despite his injuries, he remained alert, gripping the severed head of an ant in one hand. Shim Yuzu, ever the opportunist, teased him about the situation. She offered to heal him, but hinted that there would be a cost. Kenzo rolled his eyes, already anticipating her antics. She always had an ulterior motive, and he knew she wasn't talking about money. With an exasperated sigh, he told her to stop playing around and get on with it. Their banter was abruptly cut short. Just as Shimizu turned to face the approaching enemies, a blur of movement flashed across the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, her head was severed from her body, hitting the ground before she even realized what had happened. Kenzo froze, his mind struggling to process the sudden loss. Fujishima, standing nearby, was equally stunned. Their teammate, someone who had been joking just moments ago, had been slain in an instant. Before Kenzo could react further, a new threat emerged. A towering ant with glowing red eyes charged at him, moving at an inhuman speed. His instincts kicked in and he braced himself, ready to strike. His injuries no longer mattered. He had no time to hesitate. With their team caught off guard and an unknown enemy now upon them, the battle had taken a deadly turn.